What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling, and in today's video we are going to be doing something a little bit different for our video essay. We are going to be trying to answer a question. You've already clicked on this video, so you know what that question is. Which WWE Big 4 PLE is the best? Like any good answer to a question, you must first give your thesis statement as to what your answer, or in this case, my answer, is being based on. Now, it is obvious that there is a clear hierarchy for the WWE PLEs that not only applies to all of the Big Four, but all of WWE PLEs as well. In regards to the Big Four PLEs, for anyone who is unaware, that refers to WWE's 4 biggest shows of the year that are equally spaced out between the 4 business quarters of the year. Those shows are WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, and Survivor Series. These shows have anchored the WWE/WWF since 1985 with the beginning of WrestleMania and have not lost their status as part of the Big Four since their respective debuts, at least in terms of the WWE. Some fans of the WWE have begun to include a 5th pay-per-view, that being Money in the Bank, but that does not pertain to this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. And if this is your first time watching a Nacho Wrestling video, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by the end of the year, and your help would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into the video. March 31st, 1985. Some jabroni named Vince decided it would be a good idea to run a show on a national level, and it turned out to be pretty successful. Listen, we all know the story of WrestleMania at this point. Vince bankrolled and mortgaged out his entire life savings and everything he owned, and essentially threw a Hail Mary pass with booking and going through with WrestleMania. Speaking of Hail Mary passes, WrestleMania is often referred to as the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, and it's been the biggest show in the business for the past 40 going on 41 years. From the early years being dominated by Hulk Hogan and his rocking wrestling crew, which looking back on is something crazy to think about, for like the first 10 to 12 years of WrestleMania, it was essentially the Hulk Hogan show all the way through. After the Hogan era, there was of course the New Generation era, but when it comes to WrestleMania, some of the moments from the Attitude Era are what are more fond to look back on. None more fond and special than the Austin vs. Rock match and the iconic My Way promo package at WrestleMania 17. The 2 biggest stars of the company facing off at the biggest show of the year. Wonder where I've seen that before. Flash forward to recent years of WrestleMania, we've had great moments like the triumph of Kofi Mania at WrestleMania in New York, and of course, the Miracle on Bourbon Street with Daniel Bryan. Or how about the saga between Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns over WrestleMania 39 and 40? It is obvious to say WrestleMania is where WWE usually caps off some of their biggest stories of the year, and often where they crown who the next top guy is for the company. Or sometimes it is where Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns wrestle in front of a sleepy crowd in New Orleans. Not all of them can be winners, you know? Debuting in 1988, the Royal Rumble, as many know, was a concept and idea created by Pat Patterson. The very first Royal Rumble match was held as a special live TV event on the USA Network and was won by Jim Duggan. An often forgotten piece of history for the Rumble is that the concept of the winner receiving a world title shot was not introduced until the 1993 event when Yokozuna won. Some of the all-time Rumble moments, of course, include surprise entrances, like Edge's return in 2020, or the perfect return of Kurt Hennig in 2002. The Rumble show is built around the spectacle of the one match, with every fan speculating and fantasy booking their own surprise entrance every year. If WrestleMania is the Super Bowl of the WWE, then consider the Royal Rumble to be the conference finals. It sets up the final home stretch to WrestleMania and gets the WWE fan base in a particular excited mood that is hard to come out of until the season is over. Also debuting in 1988 was SummerSlam. Known today as the biggest party of the summer, SummerSlam has almost always been the younger brother who is always compared to his older brother, aka WrestleMania. While Mania has its fair share of big moments, SummerSlam has a laundry list of its own. My first major SummerSlam memory was the infamous custody ladder match between Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero for the custody of Dominic Mysterio. I remember stumbling upon a pirated copy of it on YouTube one day, and I would just watch that match over and over and over again. A not so fond memory in the moment, but looking back on it is so badass to see, is the complete decimation of John Cena at the hands of Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam in 2014. It was definitely something that nobody saw coming, and sure, Brock was going to win, but nobody thought like that. One final moment I want to bring up is the often ridiculed, and for good reason, but funny as hell feud between Undertaker versus Undertaker. That match was one of WWE's sillier endeavors, especially something on the second biggest show of the year. Nevertheless, it is still a memorable moment for SummerSlam. The final show to talk about is Survivor Series. While debuting before the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam all the way back in November of 1987, beginning as a Thanksgiving tradition, Survivor Series was initially created as a form of competition for WCW Starrcade. Survivor Series would establish an early tradition and gimmick as the Thanksgiving show, even going all in on that idea back in 1990 by having the Gobbledygooker debut out of a giant egg. Survivor Series also saw the debuts of some fucking dork named Rocky Maivia and of course, The Undertaker. Both would go on to do some of the biggest things in professional wrestling. But I don't really need to bring that up, we all know that. In recent years, Survivor Series has seen the implementation of War Games on the main roster back in 2022, and has already delivered some stellar moments from the matches they've had, like Sami Zayn showing his loyalty to the Bloodline in 2022, or how about the time Io Sky recreated her flying trash can spot in the War Games match. And of course, I would be insane not to mention the return of Phil CM Punk Brooks at the end of 2023 Survivor Series. Now that we have a good idea about the backstory and a whole laundry list of moments from each show, let's talk about how I'm going to be evaluating the Big Four PLEs, starting off with what some would consider to be the most important aspect of a show, and that is fan appeal. It is very obvious that there is a hierarchy for how excited the average fan of WWE is for each show. In the case of the Big Four, if the fan appeal was the only grading criteria for the shows, then I think a lot of people would agree that Royal Rumble takes the cake. As I previously mentioned, fans love interacting and taking part in speculations about surprise entrants, debuts, and returns in the Royal Rumble every year. No matter the landscape of WWE, the fan interest levels and appeal of getting to see the Royal Rumble match take place keeps the fans on the edge of their seat every year. Sadly, however, that is not the only grading criteria we will be looking at today. We will also be looking at 3 other qualities that make the Big Four PLEs what they are. Those other 3 qualities are match quality, unique elements, and longevity and consistency. When it comes to match quality, it is hard to pinpoint exactly what show has the best track record. Of course, you could do the obvious thing and go to cagematch.net and find out what show has the highest overall ratings, which is something I considered doing during the writing and research portion of this video, but I feel that kills the essence of the video if I bring lame-ass nerdy stats into this. If we take gimmick matches out of the equation, i.e. Royal Rumble and War Game matches, it becomes a lot easier to look at the shows and determine which one has a higher match quality. WrestleMania and SummerSlam easily chart at 1 and 2 in terms of match quality. Both shows are used to cap off major story beats, and often those major story beats are when WWE saves their best matches for last. This isn't to say that Royal Rumble and Survivor Series haven't had memorable matches of high quality. There's of course the triple threat from Rumble 2015 with Seth Rollins, John Cena, and Brock Lesnar that gets talked about constantly. Admittedly, Survivor Series is a bit tougher to pin down on match quality because so much of its history has been tied to the 5-on-5 elimination style matches, which in my opinion necessarily isn't a gimmick match. And if you take that into account, you could look at moments like Team Cena versus Team Authority from 2014, with the sharp left turn of Cena being eliminated leaving Ziggler by himself. It was a shocking moment, and on top of that, the debut of Sting. Moving forward to the uniqueness of each show, of course the Rumble has its whole identity built around the unique style of Battle Royal match that they have, and SummerSlam and WrestleMania have a simple aura about them, if you will. Meanwhile, Survivor Series has had a plethora of different unique identities. I mentioned how Survivor Series initially started out as a simple Thanksgiving show, and for a long time that's all it was. It was the show that happened around Thanksgiving. And it had a big tag match. Big fucking deal. Then during the 2016 brand split era of WWE, Survivor Series gained a new identity with its brand versus brand concepts. While not everyone's favorite part about the 2016 brand split era of WWE, the brand versus brand concepts did often produce some interesting and memorable moments over the years. Of course, we finally got 2 of WWE's greatest modern factions squaring off when The Shield took on The New Day. We also got an amazing match from Brock Lesnar and Daniel Bryan one year, and then Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles another. While all the shows have been around for different lengths of time, it's obvious that Survivor Series has gone through the most change over the years. This isn't to say that it's a bad thing, it just means that it is most affected by the booking and creative direction of WWE throughout its years. This leads us right into our final point before we assess strengths and weaknesses of each PLE, and that point is longevity and consistency. I lump these two together because they sort of go hand in hand, especially since each show has been around since the 80s and they all easily have longevity attached to their name. When it comes to consistency, you could argue that SummerSlam has been the most consistent, being the little WrestleMania to the actual show of shows, while most people will instantly jump to say WrestleMania. Because yeah, sure, on paper, the biggest show of the year has been around the longest. I guess being around since 1985 seemingly has its perks. Royal Rumble and Survivor Series have both dealt with major periods of decline and disinterest during the late 2000s, early 2010s. which, if you know about that era of WWE, it's a pretty fair thing to be disinterested in. That era of WWE produced some of the worst moments and wins of all time. Here's looking at you, Team CM Punk versus Team Mick Foley from Survivor Series 2012. Now that we've looked at the history of the individual PLEs and the grading criteria we'll be looking at, we now have to take a look back at the individual PLEs with their strengths and weaknesses. Starting off with the show of shows, the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania. WrestleMania is well known by wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans alike. I, for one, have an older sister who always jokingly refers to every version of wrestling she sees as WrestleMania, even if it has nothing to do with the WWE. WrestleMania has its own name value behind it more than any other PLE has, and maybe even more than WWE itself. This is in part thanks to its early establishment as a show where the biggest matches and biggest moments not only take place, but are watched by some of the biggest celebrities available. Keyword there being available. Like Mr. T at WrestleMania 1, or Mike Tyson at WrestleMania 14, or Lil Wayne at WrestleMania 40. Not only are the biggest stars there, but WWE gets some of the biggest coverage of the year for them as well. Outlets like ESPN and Bleacher Report cover the show ad nauseum, and even more regular news outlets like Fox or CNN will pick it up if something super groundbreaking happens. And on the business side of things, you can almost always guarantee that Forbes is going to pick it up and talk about it more often than not, and they do, since every WrestleMania seems to set a new sales record for the Federation. On that idea about how insane the coverage has become for the WWE, especially during WrestleMania season, the other side of the coin shows how many fans have become tired of the commercialism of WrestleMania. Simply put, over the years, WrestleMania has become less of a one-night extravaganza and more of an all-weekend-long endeavor. No pun intended. That is not a completely terrible thing. Ever since they introduced the two-night Mania concept, it has allowed for the card to breathe a lot better, and rather than having a congested 7-hour show, they have 2 reasonably paced 3-hour shows. A bigger issue about this is the fact that, especially in the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen whole matches sponsored by ads with the logo of the company sponsoring being placed on every single LED possible throughout the arena. Which would not be a bad thing for, say, the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, but for the blow-off match between Sami Zayn and Gunther being sponsored by Dave's Hot Chicken, that's just not the move, guys. That completely fictional ad placement being said, Mania has produced some absolutely stellar moments over its 40-plus year history, and as it rightfully should, since, I cannot stress this enough, it is WWE's biggest show of the year. Some of Mania's most significant moments of course include the likes of Hogan slamming Andre at Mania 3, which true hoopers like myself and Dave Meltzer know was done like 1,000 times beforehand by other guys, and even by Hogan himself. Also, there's a laundry list of moments from the Attitude Era. I've already mentioned the Stone Cold vs. Rock match at Mania 17, but there is also the iconic and business-changing / evolving TLC matches, featuring the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys. And then there was the iconic Rock vs. Hogan main event from Mania 18. And lastly, from the Attitude Era, a personal favorite of mine, the entirety of WrestleMania 2000. I have no idea why, but that show is so fucking funny to watch. Maybe because the only singles match on it was Terry Runnels versus the Cat. I don't fucking know. And of course, there was a laundry list of moments to come out of the post-Attitude Era and modern era of WWE. I've already briefly mentioned the Miracle on Bourbon Street, which I actually should just mention the entirety of the WrestleMania 30 card. What a great fucking show. There was the story of Becky Lynch winning the first ever women's main event at Mania, which took a really weird way to get there, but it got there. And of course, when our tribal chief, Roman Reigns, smashed, stacked, and pinned Daniel Bryan and Edge. Moving on to the Royal Rumble, the Rumble and its strengths comes from its ability to have unpredictability. Almost every year there is speculation of new debuts and call-ups for the Royal Rumble matches. And when some happen and some don't happen, it keeps the fans on the edge of their seats. Add this to the built-in storyline build-up of the winner receiving a world title shot at WrestleMania of the world title of their choosing. See, more often than not, everyone has some sort of idea who is actually going to win the Rumble and who is going to make appearances in the Rumble. That is why one of the biggest strengths of the Rumble PLE as a whole is fan excitement. Particularly fan excitement for surprise entrances and debuts like I just mentioned. The show and its regular matches also have an extra layer of excitement added to them because when done right, like during the build-up to WrestleMania 38, when Roman cost Brock the world title against Bobby Lashley, it kind of sends everyone into an uneasiness, wondering what's going to happen, how are we going to get there to WrestleMania. The whole show not only starts planting the seeds for WrestleMania, but it gets the fans in a certain type of mood, excited and ready to see some of the biggest stories finally cap off at the grandest stage of them all. Even though I just mentioned how the crowd can be invested in the undercard matches outside of the Rumbles themselves, that of course is not always the case. For a long time during the 2010s, it was almost like pulling teeth for people to watch the regular matches at a Rumble show, especially when the Rumble matches were predictable or worse, had the wrong winners. Nothing sticks in my head more than the 2012 Royal Rumble. You had Chris Jericho, who had gone through yet another successful reinvention, and the crowd was in love with him damn near more than ever. And you said, nah, fuck that shit. Here's Sheamus. Don't get me wrong now, Sheamus is awesome, and can throw down with some of the best strikers in the business today. Keyword there being today, because 2012 Sheamus was a hot bag of shit in the ring and as a character. The last major weakness coming from the Rumble is pacing. The show, especially since introducing the Women's Rumble, has struggled to find the correct pacing. If the Rumble matches go too long, then the undercard matches get cut short. Or if the Rumble matches finish quicker than expected, the regular matches have to fill time in between. If any of the PLEs were needing of 2 nights, it is definitely the Royal Rumble. As we did with WrestleMania, we will do with every other PLE, talking about some of the most memorable moments from the show. For the Rumble, we will obviously be talking about a lot of returns and debuts. Before any of that, shout out to the time Macho Man pinned Yokozuna and got vaulted out of the ring by Yoko. Completely forgetting the concept of a Rumble match and how it works, it was honestly one of the best finishes to a Royal Rumble ever. My first Rumble memory that was ingrained in my head was the legendary return from injury for John Cena at Royal Rumble 2008. Expected to not only miss the Rumble, but also miss Mania as well, no one expected to see Cena come out at the 30 spot, especially Triple H. Another moment, not necessarily a moment, but an entire Rumble match that I am particularly fond of is the 2018 Royal Rumble men's match. From the surprise entrances of Adam Cole and Andrade, to the standoff between Shinsuke Nakamura, Finn Balor, Roman Reigns, and Randy Orton, John Cena, and Rey Mysterio. It really was just a great match from top to bottom, and it is an absolute crime Shinsuke didn't win at Mania that year. Next up, we have the biggest party of the summer, and the little cousin to WrestleMania, SummerSlam. SummerSlam has been home to some of the more shocking moments in Big Four PLE history. More on those in a minute. Its positioning on the calendar year is one of its biggest strengths. A show for the summer, and a show that is usually ran in a sunny beachfront city, or at least should be in those types of cities, and not in fucking Cleveland. Sorry, Cleveland. It often gets the rap as Young WrestleMania because of the steps they take to load the SummerSlam card up the same way they do with WrestleMania. Well, unless you're Triple H. Then you only book a 6-match card for your second biggest event of the year. Usually, SummerSlam serves as a sort of sequel to Mania while also taking a chance at setting up the roadmap for Survivor Series. Especially since they have introduced War Games to the main roster, you can usually use the results of SummerSlam to determine what War Games will look like. I have mentioned it a billion times throughout this video, but the biggest issue facing SummerSlam is the fact that WWE treats it just slightly lesser than WrestleMania, but still tries to build it up as a big spectacle. Often afraid to pull the trigger on moments at that show, rather wanting to save them for 6 months down the line at WrestleMania. This has not stopped WWE, however. They have recently announced that SummerSlam will be joining WrestleMania as a 2-night event, something that will seemingly be done to all Big Four PLEs by 2026. This issue becomes more apparent with the news though. Having SummerSlam be the second event after WrestleMania to officially go to 2 nights just reinforces the idea in people's head that SummerSlam will always be the 2 to WrestleMania's 1. That idea is ludicrous since SummerSlam has produced some shocking and easily memorable moments over the years. Brock Lesnar becoming the youngest WWE champion by defeating The Rock? Or what about the squashing of John Cena, also at the hands of Brock Lesnar? And the battle of CM Punk and, you guessed it, Brock Lesnar, aka the Beast versus the Best. You know, Brock Lesnar has done so much at SummerSlam, maybe it would be a good thing if we view it as a lesser than show. SummerSlam has had moments that have nothing to do with Brock Lesnar, thankfully. Some of those include the shocking cash-in by Randy Orton on Daniel Bryan, giving birth to the Authority versus Daniel Bryan feud. The recent return of Roman Reigns also was done to near perfection, and the return of Roman Reigns in 2020 as well. And of course, my personal favorite is the Nexus versus Team WWE in a Survivor Series style elimination tag match. Speaking of Survivor Series, we are finally on the last PLE on the list. Survivor Series has been through some of the toughest of times out of all the Big Four PLEs, but before we get to that, let's take a look at the positives. Survivor Series initially started off as a simple counter-programming to Starrcade, And if you know anything about how bangin' Starrcade was back in the day, by every metric, Survivor Series should have fallen on its ass and failed terribly. The show didn't, and was able to succeed and become one of WWE's premier shows, with it being used to advance feuds between top guys and undercard feuds alike, especially when they had multiple tag team matches on the show. In that same sentiment, the show gets more people on the card with the style of tag matches that used to be involved. And that is something that everyone likes to see. More people getting screen time and time to work in the ring. Now, let's talk about the weaknesses. Like I said, Survivor Series show has been through some of the toughest times in WWE history. From starting out as a simple Thanksgiving show with a simple concept for the main event, it quickly devolved. By the third or fourth Survivor Series, almost every match on the card was a Survivor Series style tag match, which in theory sounds like fun, but a show full of multi-man tag matches becomes a little tough to watch after the fourth tag match. Then, in the Attitude Era, Survivor Series was treated like a B-show pay-per-view, not having anything of real consequence happen on those shows, except for one particular year, which we will talk about briefly. Lastly, the identity crisis issues need to be brought to attention one more time. For so long, Survivor Series didn't know what it wanted to be. And now, even again, fans are seemingly ready for Survivor Series to change again and shed the War Games theme so that War Games can be saved for special occasions rather than a task to check off. I said I would mention the Survivor Series from the Attitude Era, and if you're a true hooper, you know what I'm about to bring up. Survivor Series Deadly Games. A one-night tournament for the vacant WWF title won by The Rock, who would be revealed to be Vince's puppet for the corporation. They not only had a tournament in one night, but they also were able to subvert expectations throughout the whole night. Everyone was rooting and cheering for The Rock to make it to the finals and win the belt, and when he did and almost immediately revealed himself as the corporate champion, it was perfect. Another great Survivor Series moment was the debut of the Elimination Chamber match. In 2002, used as a way to freshen up the Survivor Series pay-per-view, the Raw brand saw 6 competitors step inside the circular structure and put on a banger of its kind, and the first of its kind to boot. The more modern era of Survivor Series is a little bit more hard to pinpoint some great moments for, I'll be honest. These are moments that have occurred at the show, but I do not know if I would describe them as great, or memorable, or awesome, or whatever other pseudonym you want to use. But some of these moments include Drake Maverick pissing himself, or the whole issue of Triple H making brand versus brand all about him versus Shane O'Mac that one year. Like I said, many fans do not look too fondly on the brand versus brand era of Survivor Series. Now comes everyone's favorite part. We are going to be ranking the shows based on the individual qualities discussed, and then give the final ranking overall and my final verdict on which show I think is the best. Starting with fan appeal. I think it's obvious which one ranks at the top. It's the Royal Rumble. Simply put, the hype and anticipation around the Rumble matches and the crowd reactions itself uplift the Rumble event in its entirety. In second place is obviously WrestleMania. Mania is their top show, and the crowd is usually energetic for the beginning of the show, and the buzz around the event only has continued to grow in the modern era. Coming in third right after Mania is SummerSlam. SummerSlam, much like Mania, usually yields great crowds that are interested and invested in the show. More often than not, it ranks second for many fans in terms of the Big Four, but for a fan appeal, I would have to give it a solid 3 out of 4. That puts Survivor Series down at the bottom, and I think a lot of people would agree with this sentiment. Survivor Series is home to a plethora of different gimmicks and ideas centered around the show, and those may have changed and evolved constantly due to a lack of fan appeal in the concepts used for the show. When it comes to match quality, it is, like I said earlier, a little difficult to properly rank them, due to the gimmick matches of the Royal Rumble and the War Games matches. However, it is not impossible. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have WrestleMania. It is obvious that WWE's biggest show of the year is home to some of their best matches of the year. This is not always the case for every match, of course, and there are going to be B-level PLEs that have matches that are even better, but the buzz and attention to detail around the matches at WrestleMania stands clear above the rest. Following WrestleMania is SummerSlam. And all for the same reasons as I just mentioned for WrestleMania, just slightly less. This is a huge reason as to why people look at SummerSlam like a sequel to WrestleMania. Coming in third and last place respectively is Royal Rumble and Survivor Series. The Rumble has had some great undercard matches over the years, and that have added an extra something to the Rumble show as a whole. Meanwhile, Survivor Series is at the last spot, again, but this is not an indication of the show being bad, it is simply being stacked up against the other Big Four PLEs, and when looking at everything Survivor Series has offered over the years, it is significantly less than the match quality of the other 3 shows. For the last quality, we have unique elements. This one is going to be a bit tougher to decipher, as I have mentioned over the years that Survivor Series has had many different unique qualities to it. Does that make it first? Well, no, it doesn't, sadly. It does bring it up significantly, though. First, we have the Royal Rumble. Of course the Rumble would be first. It has allowed for some of the more surprising and entertaining moments throughout the Big Four history. Second, we have Survivor Series. Now, I know some people are going to disagree with this heavily, and that is fine, but I think the fact that Survivor Series has been through so much change and so many different iterations, that those unique elements are even more unique because they could one day make a comeback. For third and fourth place, we have WrestleMania and SummerSlam. Now, depending on the year, these shows could be higher up on the list of unique elements. However, stacking them up against the surprising aspects of the Rumble match and the chaos of War Games, the show of shows and the biggest party of the summer fall short of having anything truly unique apart from different graphics, and sometimes that isn't even the case. Finally, it is time to give my final verdict for what I believe to be the best PLE. And before I continue, let me reiterate that this is simply my opinion. If you do not like it or disagree with it, that's fine, because I didn't ask. And also, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. With everything we've discussed and the rankings of each quality for the show, the final order stands like this. In first place, we have WrestleMania. I mean, come on, let's all be honest with ourselves. Was anything going to top their literal biggest event ever? But even more than that, the sheer volume of exposure the company gets during this time of the year and around the show of shows trumps everything else. Second, we have the Royal Rumble. While acting as a kickoff to the Mania season, it not only gets the crowd invested in the next 3 months of WWE TV, but it also gives guaranteed stories that are easy to build to unless injuries occur. Third place is SummerSlam. The biggest party of the summer, like WrestleMania, does get a lot of media coverage from ESPN to Forbes. It is just on a lesser level than Mania itself. SummerSlam has also had a plethora of sad moments or Act 2 moments happen at the summer event, which can make the show feel like a downer and not as fun as the others. And in last place, not to be disrespected for that of course, is Survivor Series. The Thanksgiving tradition that once started out as competition to WCW has evolved into something much more. It has been a place that has allowed WWE to experiment with new ideas and concepts not yet seen before on WWE TV. In my personal opinion, this is exactly how I view the importance of the Big Four, especially as it stands today. While all the shows can have banger matches on them and be fun to watch, they all have their own levels of importance to the greater story being told. Ultimately, while it may be obvious that WrestleMania is the quote-unquote best of the Big Four, there are several factors that lend to each other member of the Big Four laying claim to being the best. It is also not about the show making itself feel important, but the fans making the show feel important. It's why a show like Money in the Bank has climbed the ranks and joined the Big Four as an honorary Big Five, because we, the fans, put all of our passion and intensity into the Money in the Bank matches every year. If you are a huge fan of, say, Royal Rumble and Survivor Series, and feel as if the WWE could do better with making those shows feel as important as Mania or SummerSlam, then it is up to you to have your voice heard, even if it takes shouting it out from a rooftop. That is it for today's video. Which Big Four PLE is your favorite and why? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling, and I will see you guys next time.